As elaborately detailed as the sets were at Elstree Studios, equally impressive was the work done in California. ILM was able to produce special effects that were light years ahead of those seen in the first Star Wars.
If you look at Star Wars, you're either kind of in space, and they're all, and maybe the Death Star's back there, maybe it isn't, and you have a number of shots on different planets. If you look at Empire, and it's broad, you've got a speeder sequence and 2 or 3 big dogfights. You've got the whole Cloud City and all the interiors of different landscapes that are way beyond what we've done before. So I think it was the breadth of the work that I think differentiates that from the first show. And each one of those sequences require different problem-solving skills.
We did this incredible chase through the asteroid field. Designing asteroids is not as easy as you think, and I remember many of us in the model shop tried to come up with something that would look good, and I think for some of the very far ones we had used potatoes.
The biggest problem I had is it just wasn't going fast enough, and I was running out of money. Irvin Kershner was an extremely good director, but the film went over budget, went over schedule, and all the money I had in Star Wars was committed to this film, plus more.
We shot several scenes in Empire over again. There's a scene in Cloud City where Han Solo character is kind of pacing up and down, and Princess Leia comes in, and he reacts to the way she looks, because she's dressed differently than she has in the entire rest of the film.
You look beautiful. You should wear girls' clothes all the time.
We looked at the dailies and we weren't happy with anything, really. The attitude of the actors was too obvious.
Sit down. Come on, talk to me.
And we could have let that go, but it just didn't feel right.
6 retake. Action.
I hope Luke made it to the fleet all right.
I'm sure he's fine. He's probably sitting around wondering what we're up to right now.
You know, your friend Lando's very charming, but I don't trust him.
Trust him. He's an old friend of mine.
And Slade.
So we shot it in a slightly more subtle fashion, which is the way it's in the film now.
I don't trust Lando.
Well, I don't trust him either. But he is my friend. Besides, he'll soon be gone.
And then you're as good as gone, aren't you?
Although most production challenges had been anticipated and expectations were understandably high, when Empire went over budget by $10 million, Lucasfilm suddenly found itself in a fiscal crisis.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
3 of the top executives of Bank America Entertainment walked into my office saying, we have to pull your loan. And I said, how can the largest bank in the entertainment business, with the sequel to the most successful movie ever out, be wanting to pull my loan? And they said, well, we have a new credit manager, and he just has a rule. Budget doubles, he pulls the loan. One of the bankers quit over it. They knew it was a big mistake, but, you know, I was stuck with trying to make $1 million payroll that Friday.
Release your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me.
That was the big difference between the studio system and the independent view of filmmaking. The studio have a large resource to draw on for what they do, and independents don't. So it's a much tighter situation.
I was just hoping the bank to allow me to finish without going back to 20th Century Fox and giving away all my rights. Because that's ultimately what my other choice was to just simply let them own it and lose my independence. But I wanted my independence so badly We managed to do it in a way that I paid them just a little bit more money, but they didn't get any of the licensing and they didn't get any of the sequels, and that's what I was trying to hold on to. If I had to pay a few extra points in order to get them to guarantee a loan with the bank, I could do that. And I think Fox was just as concerned that the movie get finished as we were.
While Empire's budget may have been tight, security during the production was even tighter. Only Lucas, Kirshner, and the film's producers knew the real story.
At the time, I knew that Mark had a father and that it was Darth Vader. But this was not in the script. There was a false page inserted. And I had the knowledge. The actors didn't even have it. No one had it. It was a total secret.
The script was under lock and key, the models were under lock and key, ILM was under lock and key and shrouded from the rest of the world. The storyline of the movie was under lock and key.
You are beaten. It is useless to resist.
The film's shocking climax, in which Darth Vader reveals Luke Skywalker's true parentage, was kept a secret from nearly everyone, even David Prowse and Mark Hamill. Hamill was told privately, just moments before the cameras rolled.
I met with Mark and said, you know that Darth Vader's your father. What?
They had taken me aside and said, this is what he's really going to say.
And we're going to do the scene. And Darth Vader will be saying stuff that doesn't count. Forget it. Use your own rhythm compared to what he's doing.
There is no escape. Don't make me destroy you.
We did a few takes, and he finally got into it.
Join me, and I will complete your training.
And here's Darth Vader, who had his dialogue, by the way, and he's speaking the dialogue. He thinks it's being recorded, you see. It's not being recorded. What's being recorded is this, this, this.
He said, you don't know the truth. Obi-Wan killed your father.
And then, of course, we re-recorded everything.
I'll never join you! If you only knew the power of the dark side.
When I first saw the dialogue that said, Luke, I am your father, I said to myself, he's lying. I wonder how they're going to play that lie out.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
And I screamed, no, just as it was meant to be.
Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
I think that it went beyond Star Wars. You got to know the characters a little better. You had some humor.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
I thought of the film as a second movement of a symphony. That's why I wanted some of the things slower. And it ends in a way that you can't wait to see, to hear the Vivace, the next movie, the Allegretto. I didn't have a climax at the end. I had an emotional climax.
As Empire's premiere date approached, the producers once again held their collective breath. When The Empire Strikes Back finally opened on May 21st, 1980, it didn't meet expectations, it surpassed them. Within 3 months, George Lucas had recovered his $33 million investment.
There was something about Empire that just immediately just clicked when I saw it. I didn't know how all the romance was going to work and the adventure, and was it too serious and all this sort of stuff. But it really came together.
Until its premiere, cases of lightning striking twice were rare in Hollywood. Sequels were almost always a letdown. But in the Star Wars universe, different laws applied, and George Lucas, the world's most successful independent filmmaker, was fast becoming a law unto himself. In a radical move by Hollywood standards, he shared Empire's profits with every one of his employees. handing out over $5 million in bonuses in 1980. The profits from the 2 Star Wars films also helped fuel Lucas's rapidly expanding business enterprises.
We did have some money, but it was still a startup company. We could have messed it up as much as we did it right. But his ability to make successful movies is what drove the financial success of the company. But how we used those funds to grow the company and why he has a net worth the way he does, he was smart enough to understand all the rights, all the ancillaries.
By financing The Empire Strikes Back with his own money, George Lucas had bet the farm and won. In fact, he was in a position to build his own kind of farm, Skywalker Ranch in Marin County, California. Lucas had long imagined a visually inspiring setting, where his employees could work in a creative atmosphere, and where friends like Steven Spielberg, Robert Redford, and Francis Ford Coppola could enjoy working at a state-of-the-art facility.
George was debating on 2 different parcels of land. One was on Lucas Valley Road. And I said, well, that's the one you have to pick.
The company structure supported multi-movies in all areas, merchandising, special effects, ancillaries.
And so all the little companies had to be started and operated and have all these systems put in place.
LucasArts, THX, Skywalker Sound, Industrial Light and Magic. Each subsidiary of Lucasfilm would serve George Lucas's creative vision. In turn, they revolutionized a film industry that had for too long been plagued by complacency.
It was an idea of one person and successfully implemented. George is one of the more successful companies in the world, and you can't measure it just by size because he doesn't need the size of a Fox or a Warner's to accomplish the same thing he's accomplishing and putting out his films.
As the sole owner of the most successful franchise in movie history, Lucas had gained the financial means and the creative freedom to produce anything he wanted.
George's greatest strength as a filmmaker is that he's a great storyteller. George has a vision. There are filmmakers down through history like Capra and John Ford, and they made John Ford pictures and Frank Capra pictures, and Hitchcock made Hitchcock films, and George Lucas makes George Lucas pictures.
George Lucas had helped turn the tide of Hollywood's downbeat realism and brought back a sense of fantasy and wonder. Movies were fun again. But in the wake of Empire, the filmmaker found himself unexpectedly mired in Hollywood politics. To preserve the dramatic opening sequences of his films, Lucas wanted the screen credits to come at the end of the movies. It was a highly unusual choice. And for the first Star Wars, the Writers Guild and Directors Guild had allowed it. But when Lucas did the same for the sequel, they fined him over $250,000 and even attempted to pull Empire from theaters. Next, the DGA went after Irvin Kershner. To protect his director, Lucas paid all the fines to the guilds, but the situation left him feeling frustrated and persecuted.
Lucas was so upset that he dropped out of the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild, and the Motion Picture Association.
Another unfortunate casualty in the wake of Empire was Alan Ladd Jr., Lucas's most vocal supporter at 20th Century Fox.
The criticism over the deal is what ended my tenure at Fox, really, because people were very angry and irritated, even though they made millions of dollars off it, and had a big fight, stomped out of the boardroom, said I quit. That was it.
20th Century Fox ultimately paid a heavy price for Ladd's departure. With his longtime ally gone from the studio, Lucas decided to go to Paramount with his latest movie idea, an action-adventure yarn called Raiders of the Lost Ark. George Lucas had fought and won the battle to gain his independence as a filmmaker. But the war between his Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire was far from over. As he began production on the final chapter of his Star Wars saga, he knew expectations among fans and critics would be greater than ever before. The project was a high-stakes gamble, with Lucas once again putting up every dollar himself. Nothing about the film, not even the smallest detail, could be taken for granted.
George came to me and he said, the title of episode 6 is Return of the Jedi. And I said, I think it's a weak title. And he came back 1 or 2 days later and he says, we're calling it Revenge of the Jedi.
Choosing the film's title was just the beginning. Jedi would require thousands of production decisions on both sides of the globe.
We were constructing really in 2 places in California, shooting at ILM, that's 3, and of course working and shooting in London at the same time.
As Lucas discovered, independence was a double-edged sword. Quitting the Directors Guild made it impossible for him to hire his first choice, Steven Spielberg. Instead, Lucas chose Welshman Richard Marquand, best known for the World War II thriller Eye of the Needle. As the two met with Lawrence Kasdan to discuss Jedi's script, a key issue was whether Harrison Ford, who is now equally famous for the role of Indiana Jones, would return as Han Solo.
The other actors after Star Wars had signed on to do 2 more because I wanted to finish the whole thing. Harrison did not. He had the idea, oh, why don't you kill him off? Why don't you kill him off?
I thought Han Solo should die. I thought he ought to sacrifice himself for the other 2 characters.
I also felt someone had to go. You know, I felt someone had to die.
I said, he's got no mama, he's got no papa, he's got no future. He has no story responsibilities at this point. So let's allow him to commit self-sacrifice.
And I thought it should happen very early in the last act so that you would begin to worry about everybody. We should sacrifice somebody. And George was against it. And George knew what he wanted, and he got what he wanted.
Hey, it's me. Once production began, Lucas was determined not to let the budget escalate as it had on Empire.
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
It wasn't easy, given that the rest of the world assumed money was no object.
Anytime you would go in and try and negotiate for production facilities, people would say, oh, well, that'll cost $2 when it might normally cost $1. So I had the suggestion that we change the name of the picture. It was called Blue Harvest, and the subline behind it was Horror Beyond Imagination.
Camera.
The idea behind it was to come up with a title that would instill absolutely no interest whatsoever in what you were doing. It was like, well, what is Blue Harvest? It's like, well, who cares? It worked until Han and Luke and Leia showed up to come to work. And everybody went, oh, I guess this really isn't horror beyond imagination. I guess this is really the next Star Wars movie.
Revenge of the Jedi would again reunite the Star Wars cast and crew, who after 6 years and 2 record-breaking motion pictures had formed a lasting bond.
With the same crew for all 3 films, for the most part. So it was, you know, a family.
I'm walking along by myself, rehearsing, going something like, Lando Calrissian never returned from this awful place, and so on and so on.
Lando Calrissian and poor Chewbacca never returned from this awful place.
And suddenly I hear beep, 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 and I turn around, and George is now crouched behind me, waddling along, sort of on his haunches, going beep, 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 beep. It was a joyous moment.
Like its predecessor, Jedi continued to expand the cast of characters in the Star Wars saga.
What's that?
One of the biggest was intergalactic gangster
I know that laugh.
Jabba the Hutt.
George said, oh, I need something that's, you know, alien and grotesque. That's like Sidney Greenstreet. Oh, okay. When I had kind of gotten this idea down to this big slug-like thing that is just this big pulsating mass of flesh. At one point, I had a fez on one of the characters, like Sidney Greenstreet. And then Stuart Freeborn in England's job was to fabricate the thing, and that was operated with one puppeteer for each arm, 2 puppeteers for the arms, another guy doing the head, another guy, radio control guy, doing the eyes. There was like a couple little people in it, pulling things to make the tail move around. was quite a thing.
I had my little dwarf sitting inside. I had a little seat made for him in the tail here, and he operated it all. And he was sitting there for quite a few days doing this, and if he operated the first one, it made, whichever way he pulled it, it would either lift it upwards or sideways, you see, so that he could make that move in any direction.
And action.
At last, Master Luke's come to rescue me.
I must be allowed to speak.
Jedi mode spian go eat.
You will bring Captain Solo and the Wookiee to me.
Master Luke, you're standing on...
Jabba has to pull the rug out from under Luke, and he falls into the pit, and there's this big Rancor pit monster. George was really adamant that we were going to do it as a man in a suit. It was going to be like a really cool Godzilla. Tony McVeigh, one of the sculptors, fabricated this big Rancor suit, and based on my design. And I designed this thing that I call it kind of a cross between a bear and a potato. It was just this big, dumb thing. But it never looked that great, no matter what we did. So at some point, George said, no, let's do it, some other way. And so, Dennis thought, well, let's try and do it as a, high-speed, puppet. We designed the skeleton for Rancor. Tom Santamon and Dave Sasala and I, puppeteered the thing. It was a crazy, way of working, because this thing, it has to, walk into a room and turn around and roar, and it's like a 4-second shot, and you're shooting at 90 frames a second. You've got a second to shoot it.
ILM's creatures might have been puppets, but they could still elicit an emotional reaction from their human co-stars. One even triggered a panic attack.
I got claustrophobia once, and I didn't even have the whole suit on. I was lying on the floor, the camera is about that far away from me. Salacious Crumb, the wonderful Salacious Crumb, animated by Tim Rose. And he's pulling out my eye.
4A, take 2, A and B.
Action.
And something went in my mind, I didn't catch a breath or something, and I suddenly could feel panic just absorbing into my body.
Look, my eyes, start to help!
And I was saying, get me out, get me out, get me out, get me out, get me out. And I just kept repeating it until they managed to whiz the head off.
Daniels may have lost his head as 3PO, but when it came to risking life and limb, the production now had a team of trained stunt professionals. For the execution scene on Jabba's barge, stunt performers dropped in on the most ravenous monster yet, the Sarlacc.
It wasn't edited that way, but I was the first guy to come off the skiff into the pit, because I had to make sure it would work and everybody was going to be all right. I had a lot of sand coming on top of me. But I was able to say to the guys, if you go in, shut your eyes, keep your mouth closed, right? Put some cotton wool up your nose, otherwise you'll be sniffing up sand. 2 or 3 people went in one after the other. So as one went in, they pulled him out, the other one went in, they pulled him out. So, I mean, what was happening down below is a comedy film of its own, quite honestly, yes. But these are the things the public don't see.
Chewie, your head? Where is it?
B, take 1. A and B.
Well, I was hanging on that rope with Han Solo, and he was trying to save me, and one of the squids went right through my toe. And I'm screaming to Dan, you know, stop, stop. He's so busy acting. And I'm like, you know, I'm in pain, and all of a sudden he realized that I got hurt.
Oh, wait, I thought you were flying! It's all right, I can see a lot better. Don't move! A little higher! Just a little higher!
Harrison really, you know, he's one of those actors who he's very intense.
Chewie, pull some!
And he really gets into what he's doing, you know. So he was really into it.
For Carrie Fisher, getting into the role of Leia this time meant fitting into a skimpy slave girl costume.
I got to kill Jabba the Hutt, but I was still much more concerned about the slave girl outfit and what I was going to do about exercise.
1C, take 2. A and B cameras.
Wave your arm around. And darting, action!
And then George Lucas said, oh, instead of attacking Jabba from the front and be getting angry with him and whacking him, I want Carrie Fisher to jump on his back. And then she'd got her high-heeled shoes on, and it happened to be that my little fellow inside, it was only foam rubber, and it went right into his head, and he screamed his head off. So we had to stop the car.
Right, hold it.
Before they could do the shot again, I had to build a little firm bit over the top of his head so she could get up there. Take 3, pick up. A and B camera.
Background planning, go. Okay, and action!
That was a great relief. He was an unpleasant thing with a mung in the corner of the mouth, and I never really liked that.
Let's go, and don't forget the droids. Run away!
For the veteran cast members, bringing something fresh to their characters was often difficult.
Don't move!
I love you.
I know.
Stand up!
Another challenge on the set was Richard Marquand's relative inexperience with special effects.
It's a difficult thing to do, you know, work on the one hand with, you know, the special effects, and on the other hand with a storyline with actors, you know, and making those two things marry.
I hadn't realized that, you know, ultimately it's probably easier for me to do these things than to farm them out. Because it was even more complex than the last one, I really did have to end up being there every day on the set and working very closely with Richard and shooting second unit, and there was really more work than I thought it was going to be.
Under Lucas's supervision, the production moved to the redwood forests of Northern California.
Camera.
There they photographed one of the film's most exhilarating action sequences.
Hey, wait!
The speeder bike chase.
Quick, jam their comlink, center switch!
I got the idea of using a Steadicam, and we did a test in a local park here of walking through the woods on a path that we kind of disguised, and he shot with a camera that shot 1 frame of film every second. So when you project it back 24 frames a second, it's going 24 times faster. And we figured he walked about 5 miles an hour. It came up to about 100 miles an hour, and it looked great.
Jedi surprised audiences with its imaginative scope, both large and small. It introduced a tiny but valiant new ally to the rebellion, a race of pint-sized warriors known as Ewoks.
And action. Hey, point that thing someplace else.
Hey! All right, don't. It'll be all right.
Joining the cast was Warwick Davis, who was just a youngster at the time, but also a die-hard Star Wars fan.
I was an 11-year-old boy at school, and my grandmother happened to hear a radio commercial on the London radio station, and they were putting out a call for short people to be in this new Star Wars movie. I don't think anybody on the movie was quite as excited as I was. You know, being an 11-year-old on a Star Wars set, there was no stopping me.
In the role of Wicket, Davis became the film's most prominently featured Ewok. But only after Kenny Baker was suddenly taken ill.
I had this scene with Carrie and the speeder bikes in California, in the Redwoods. And I was looking forward to this. I thought, well, not Carrie's nice. I like working with Carrie.
Come the morning of the shoot, Kenny was very ill in bed with what I believe was food poisoning.
I was seriously in pain and said, well, we've got to do it because we've got Carrie Fisher in and we've got the scene set up. So Warwick took over.
72A, take 2. A and B camera. Don't forget the spirit.
And they called me in to play the scene instead.
Action.
Cut it out!
I had a dog at the time, and I remember whenever he would hear a strange noise, he would tilt his head from side to side to look inquisitive, and I took those kind of movements and used them in the character. So whenever he sees something or hears a strange sound, he would, you know, tilt his head.
115S, take 3. A camera mark. Mark.
What did he say? Ewok!
He said, look out! Ah!
I like Ewoks. And I think they're in there to really show that you don't need technology, you need the will and the belief to take you through anything. And the fact that, you know, the Ewoks were able to defeat the Empire only using ropes and rocks, I think that said something about them as a race of creatures.
Fighters coming in.
Doesn't matter how much machinery you have. If the will of the people is strong, they will always win.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
And action.
As filming on Revenge of the Jedi drew closer to completion, emotions ran high. And saying goodbye would be difficult.
As we were finishing the third one, we really had the sense of it was the end, that they were going to tie up all the loose ends, and there was a kind of clearing your locker out at the end of the semester feel to it all. So part of me was saying, oh, I'm so glad to put this behind me. And the other aspect was, well, what about all the adventures that Luke could have?
For the moment, George Lucas was totally focused on completing his epic trilogy. He weighed every decision, including a change in Jedi's title just weeks before it opened.
Just before it got to the theaters, George came back and he said, I want to go back to Return of the Jedi. Now, the logic behind that was a Jedi does not take revenge.
Return of the Jedi opened on Wednesday, May 25th, 1983, exactly 6 years from the day that Star Wars made its debut. On its first day, the film took in $6.2 million, making it the biggest opening day box office in history by nearly $1 million.
Told you they'd do it.
But for George Lucas, completing the trilogy involved personal sacrifice. The success of Jedi would be bittersweet at best.
The challenge is always trying to do something that's all-consuming with having a private life. And I had made the decision after Star Wars that I had certain goals in my private life. One was to be independent of Hollywood. The other one ultimately was to have a family. I finished Return of the Jedi. I figured that was the end of it for me. I figured, well, I've done it. I finished my trilogy. This is what I started out to do. This is what I was determined to get finished. And it was overwhelming and difficult, but fate has a way of stepping in. I ended up getting divorced right as the film Jedi was finished, and I was left to raise my daughter.
With the profits he made from the Star Wars movies and merchandise, George Lucas was able to keep funding his dream of pushing the boundaries of film and audio technology. For the next 2 decades, he continued to create new and exciting innovations, and in the process, he fundamentally changed filmmaking for the better. In 1984, Lucasfilm revolutionized motion picture editing with Editroid and Soundroid, the world's first non-linear digital editing systems. For the first time, filmmakers could instantly access any frame or audio track at the touch of a button. In 1985, Lucasfilm's computer division invented the Pixar computer, helping generate a new form of animation characterized by three-dimensional realism. The division was later sold and became Pixar Animation Studios, the creator of such instant classics as Toy Story. The digital breakthroughs that Lucas himself had ushered in would eventually lead him back full circle to Star Wars. In 1993, after helping create ILM's groundbreaking effects in Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park, Lucas concluded that digital technology had finally caught up to his original vision. In 1997, he would revisit and perfect his galactic saga at last, with the Star Wars Trilogy Special Edition.
For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
Things I couldn't afford to do at the time, things that I had to give up on because I just didn't have the time or money or the power to do it. I was able to go in, complete the films the way I originally intended them to be, and have it be pretty much the way I want them to be.
In 1999, 22 years after the original premiere, Lucas introduced Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The film marked the beginning of another trilogy for a new generation. It also allowed Lucas to continue his pioneering use of digital technology.
I'm finishing this for the love of Star Wars. I like Star Wars. I want to see the whole thing finished.
For more than 3 decades, George Lucas's passion and dedication to the Star Wars saga has brought its share of rewards. But like the Force itself, success also has its dark side.
What I was trying to do is stay independent so I could make the movies I wanted to make. But at the same time, I was sort of fighting the corporate system, which I didn't like. And I'm not happy with the fact that corporations have taken over the film industry. But now I found myself being the head of a corporation. So there's a certain irony there, is that I have become the very thing that I was trying to avoid, which is basically what part of Star Wars is about.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
That is Darth Vader. He becomes the very thing that he's trying to protect himself against. But at the same time, I feel good that I'm able to make my movies the way I want them to be.
While George Lucas has remained true to his own vision, it's been audiences everywhere who've reaped the rewards. Ever since May 1977, when moviegoers first caught sight of that galaxy far, far away.
The themes that George is dealing with are so strong, so primordial. The conflicts between children and their parents. Luke Skywalker was George growing up. George facing conflict and the need to prove himself.
You have learned much, young one.
And he did, powerfully.
You'll find I'm full of surprises.
George was somehow able to put the good guys and the bad guys and the mythology in a package that somehow touched us. I don't know how. I guess if you know how, everybody would be doing it.
Do or do not. There is no try. I am so pleased to be a part of that whole legend, even as an observer, and I am just an observer. Most impressive.
He's created people that everyone in the world knows. Any author that could create such memorable characters would be a very happy person indeed.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
He really established the independent film market. His films changed epic productions. He changed storytelling. He created what Hollywood is today.
I'm out of it. For a little while, everybody gets delusions of grandeur.
George was creating a new world for Hollywood, and we were lucky enough to be a part of it.
Come on! He's not just the creator and director, now he is the studio. He can make exactly the movie that he wants to make.
Obi-Wan has taught you well.
One of the things that George Lucas has done in Star Wars is to communicate, in fact, with the younger self that resides somewhere inside even the oldest person.
Good shot, Red 2.
I think our cultural imagination has been transformed by Lucas's films, by taking us back to stories that make us all feel that we share in the heroic journey of the human species on this earth.
The Force will be with you, always.
George Lucas moved us into a new place in space, a new time in the future, which no one else had created up to that time. Star Wars had a tremendous impact on the young people, as well as adults for that matter.
I've committed myself to making these movies. I believe in these movies. I think they're very entertaining, and I think if I can get a room full of people and they enjoy it, then I've done whatever I hope to do.
For George Lucas, what began as a quest for creative freedom became a philosophy, a cultural phenomenon, and an empire of dreams.
And may the Force go with you.